Well, let's take a look at the war on drugs, right? I mean, it's been declared probably 20 times in the last 20 years or so. Every couple of years it's declared. It's declared against a background of understanding. For example, it was studied years ago by the RAND Corporation, the main government advisory corporation, and the Army, in which they investigated just straight cost-benefit analysis of various ways of treating the drug problem. Drug problem's here, it's not in Colombia. So they said, well, which ways of dealing with the problem here are cost-effective? And they found, which will surprise no one who's paid attention to the history, that the most cost-effective way of doing it is prevention and treatment. Okay? In fact, if you think about it, that's the way one of the worst drug problems has been handled. I mean, there is a drug which is much worse than cocaine. It's called tobacco. It kills far more people than cocaine does. And it was handled pretty well by cultural change. So if you look through the 1980s, it's a class issue. So people with education and degree of privilege simply adopted a more healthy lifestyle. They stopped smoking, they stopped eating red meat, they didn't drink as much coffee, and so on. There were no police, nobody carried out chemical warfare in North Carolina and Kentucky to destroy tobacco fields. It was simply an educational process, a kind of cultural change that led to a significant decline of the use of, by far, the most dangerous drug among people who were a part of that cultural change that took place thanks to their privilege. Okay, now that's exactly what the RAND and the Army studied years ago. They were, of course, discussing tobacco, but that's exactly what they concluded about hard drugs or marijuana. They said the cheapest and the most effective way of dealing with it is prevention and treatment. Well, there's another way, use of police. Okay, that's much less effective and much more costly. There's a third way, interdiction at the borders. That's still more expensive by quite a large margin and far less and far more costly. And the worst way of all, way more costly than anything else and totally ineffective, is what we call fumigation, but what in fact is chemical warfare. I've been down to southern Colombia and seen some of it. It's chemical warfare, which is driving huge numbers of peasants off their land, destroying their crops. Colombia has the second biggest refugee problem in the world after Sudan. And they're driven into urban slums, and multinational corporations come in and start mining, and so on and so forth. That's the least effective and the most costly. And, the fact that we do it, again, if you can kind of abstract yourself and pretend you're a Martian looking at this, is just kind of unimaginable. I mean, the number of people in Colombia killed by U.S. tobacco is way beyond the number of Americans killed by Colombian cocaine. If you go to a country like China, it's astronomically more. Okay, do they have a right to come to the United States and carry out chemical warfare in North Carolina and Kentucky because they have a tobacco problem and it's coming from here? I mean, you can't even speak the words. It's so outlandish. But we do it and we think it's just fine. Even though it's known to be the least effective, the most costly, and totally immoral, as we see right away if we think of the situation reversed. Well, that's been going on for decades. That's the war on drugs. It hasn't affected the use of drugs here at all.
Let's hear from Ernie in Tucson, Arizona. Ernie, welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Hi, I'm an internal medicine physician as well as a registered pharmacist in Arizona. I also perform Homeland Security exams for patients that are immigrating to the United States. We're situated about 86 miles from the border, and I see the intersection of those three different fields. And I think personally that they should legalize drugs, all drugs, so that they can control them, tax them, provide prevention and treatment programs just like they do for alcohol, decrease the amount of home invasions across the border, as well as decrease the number of narco trafficking deaths along the border, decrease the incentive for people bringing drugs across. I mean, I had a piece of property 26 miles north of the border. People were walking across the border all the time. You have buses full of illegal immigrants on the way to the small town 26 miles north of the border. And from my perspective, what you see on the news are these huge drug busts of kilos of marijuana and cocaine. Yet when I report to the local police that there's somebody forging my name on narcotics at the local pharmacy, they send me over to the detectives. I leave a recording. I never get a call back. I've reported this to DEA, and I get the same treatment. So I think that it's all huffing and puffing, and there is no serious program to try to decrease the amount of narcotics coming into this country. I think it's more for political reasons, that they can get a foothold in these countries to set up more army bases, etc.
All right, Ernie, let's give our guests a chance to answer. Thanks very much.
Well, on the legalization issue, it's not something that's discussed either by myself or in the White House. No country in the world has legalized drugs. And if you think about the legalized drugs we do have, talking about the prescriptions earlier, we know that there are lots of problems. We're not able to control them. We're not able to keep them out of the hands of young people. We're not actually able to keep them from causing deaths among a lot of people. So I don't think legalization is anything that's going to be entertained or discussed at any level.